Just as the gods are imprisoned in the stars, the city of Tulum is also trapped forever between a wall and the turquoise immensity of the Caribbean Sea. When the ancient Mayas still inhabited and contemplated the world, these towers shielded the walled complex where temples, palaces, and altars are still standing in a layout forming plazas. The House of the Chultun. A chultun was the name given to the reservoirs of underground water deposits carved in rock. Wooden lintels, benches, and wide chambers in the interior can still be seen. In this temple, placed next to the edge of a cliff, the wind god Ayum-Ik was revered. His name reminds us of the music that the wind makes as it blows between the trees and the palm trees. Tulum was one of the most important trading ports during the late post-classic period. The walled city had been inhabited since the classic period, but it reached its splendor towards the end of the pre-Hispanic era, when long centuries of awakenings and wisdom in Mesoamerica were coming to an end. Here the Mayas revered Venus, the descending god. The House of the Columns, which long ago held a vault, today only has the sky as its infinite roof. Similar to the House of the Chultun, here we can observe wooden lintels. is believed that the conquistador Juan de Grijalva and his men were the first Europeans to see this site in 1518, while exploring the coast of what today is Quintana Roo, or Siam Kaan, the place where the sky originates. There in Siam Kaan, just where the sun is born, lays the majestic Tulum, or Sama, a Maya name that means sunrise. The Temple of the Paintings. The stucco masks that rest in the corners of the main facade symbolize the celestial serpent, also associated with Kukulkan. The celestial serpent, with plumed wings and a large nose, is frequently mistaken for Chak, the rain god. There are still traces of the orange, the red, and the black polychrome that colored these ancient sedentary masks. Inside the Temple of the Frescoes, we can see as a century-old survivor the masterly executed artwork that is inherent to the Mayas, worshippers of beauty and perfection. The Great Palace is located to the north of the Temple of the Paintings. Once again, the figure of the descending god welcomes us from above the entrance. The castle is the tallest structure in Tulum, a magnificent example of the East Coast architectural style, which characterizes this settlement. Several periods of construction are noticeable here. Thus, over a foundation integrated by two bodies, which are built during a first stage, a temple was raised. It should be noticed that the walls were torn down deliberately, so that if we look at them from a perspective, they appear to be in an upright position. A temple dedicated to Venus, the descending god, he who radiates the first light that appears in the sky at dusk. Geometric figures with a symbolic content decorate the moldings of the entries. Maya art becomes evident in every small detail, in an eternal expression of the link that exists between the human and the divine. Leaning towards the sea, Tulum prepares itself during the night to give birth to a new sunrise. The archaeological ruins of El Rey, or the King, are located in Cancun, a site situated to the far east of the peninsula of Yucatan. They represent another example of the historical moment prior to the European conquest. There is evidence that this Maya city, which obtained from the water the life to sustain itself, was occupied since the late preclassic period. But the existing constructions belong to the late postclassic period that covers approximately from 1250 after Christ until the 16th century. The palace and its 18 columns still remind us of the time of the ancient cities where the gods lived side by side with mankind. Together with the changes the Maya culture was subjected to at the beginning of the post-classic period, also known as the collapse, the population moved from the jungle to the seashore. The inhabitants from places such as Tulum or El Rey owed their subsistence to the maritime trade between the neighboring cities. The site consists of several foundations and sloping panels, as well as of palaces with columns. The center of El Rey communicates with surrounding housing compounds through a series of pathways. Playa del Carmen originates along the border between the coastline and the rose-colored sky that announces the arrival of dawn. One of the two buildings in this small settlement in Quintana Roo has two chambers, vaults, and a sanctuary in its interior. The island of Cozumel has 30 Maya settlements. One of the largest and most relevant sites is San Gervasio, which reached its splendor in the year 1200 after Christ. It was no doubt one of the most important trading ports in this region. Towards the end of the late post-classic period, San Gervasio was possibly the capital of the province of Cozumel. The sites of El Real and El Cedral, both subordinated to San Gervasio, also belong to the late post-classic period. The Sacbés are limestone roads that interconnected the three monumental complexes that integrate the city. The architecture of San Gervasio, like Tulum and all the other sites in the state of Quintana Roo, is typical of the style of the East Coast. Maya pilgrims who venerated Ixchel, our unique lady, the moon, goddess of birth and medicine, and patroness of seamen, used to come to the port of San Gervasio. Xel-Ha rises in the center of the state of Quintana Roo, situated between the Caribbean Sea and the beautiful lagoon with multicolored waters. Two periods of occupation, and therefore of construction, can be identified in this site. The first during the late Classic period, and the second at the end of the post-Classic period. Was an important trading port, and like Tulum, it is surrounded and was formerly protected by a wall. As in the rest of the East Coast architecture during the post-Classic period, its constructions have smaller dimensions, and they combine low platforms, temples, and palaces with columns. The Temple of the Birds. The remains of mural paintings are still preserved inside. Observe representations of birds from long ago, whose flight and songs cut through the sky in ancient times. The Jaguar compound is formed by several temples and small bases and raised platforms. The House of the Jaguar shelters mural paintings of a feline with its head forward and its legs spread apart. Warmed by the sun, the art of Shelha is nourished by the color and the clarity of the lagoon that will forever lay at its feet. The fortified site named Xcaret rises between the sea and the cenotes, large water reservoirs in communion with the blue depth. Together with the low platforms and palaces, we find foundations with the remains of temples, marvelous eyewitnesses to Maya wonder before the entire universe. These remains show signs of mural paintings and stucco decoration, which is a mixture of lime and sand. In their religious contemplation, the Mayas knew how to keep silent before the secret and the sacred. In order to get to the trading place of Muyil, it was necessary to go across lagoons and channels that cut through several kilometers of solid ground. Merchants traveled to that place in cedar canoes to trade in pottery, cacao seeds, honey, and cotton fabrics, bringing flint, jade, metals, furs, and feathers from the south. Other seafarers traveled through these waters with the sole purpose of finding a lonely temple that would remind them of the time when everything was suspended, calm and silent. Everything was motionless, quiet, and the entire sky was empty. origins of Muyil date back to the late preclassic period, toward the year 1000 before Christ. Muyil may have been the most important Maya city in Quintana Roo during the post-classic period, which ended with the Spanish conquest. During that time of prosperity, most government and ceremonial buildings in the site were built according to the East Coast style. The Maya city of Muyil has often been compared to Venice because of its channels. It has more than 100 buildings that intertwined with the vegetation, the foundations of which sink deeply into the ground, just as trees that bury their roots. Inspired in the flight of 1,000 birds, Muyil is determined to rise high in order to reach the sky. The exuberant jungle grows over a sleeping koba, as if it tried to shelter with its wild branches the ruins of the greatest majestic city that ever existed in this world. The pyramid of Uxmal, the Great Mound, built between 600 and 800 after Christ, dominates the group of buildings known by the same name. Each of the entries to the temple that stands at the top of the Uxmal pyramid is crowned with niches that provide shelter to the descending god. 7,200 years of erosion have rendered it impossible to decipher the meaning that these stones must have had such a long time ago. From an architectural point of view, this zone is linked to the Maya region of the Guatemala Petén, the zone with the great swamps, jungles and savannas, even though it also presents common traits with the central and western regions of the peninsula of Yucatan. Buildings dating back to the post-classic period, with walls sheltering scenes of life snatched away from time, are concentrated in the complex of the paintings. The earliest evidence of human settlement in Coba has been found in this compound. More than 30 sculptured stelae have been discovered in the region of Coba. Unintelligible, their full meaning will remain a mystery for nights and years to come. The group of stelae. One of them shows a richly attired figure wearing a feathered headdress and jaguar skin clothing, preparing for a ritual and holding a ceremonial staff. The heads of supernatural beings are represented in one of its edges. Each block of limestone in Coba preserves a halo of knowledge and splendor. pyramid, known as the church, is the most impressive structure in the place. The pottery found here and its architectural style make it possible to place the period of its construction between the years 600 and 900 after Christ, during the late Classic period. The most prevalent color then was a very intense brick red. Maya architects and construction workers, perhaps without knowing it, found their place for posterity in this imposing work. In the year 700 after Christ, the population of Coba consisted of 70,000 inhabitants, according to calculations. These were Mayas who in those days walked with pride, fully aware of their knowledge and wisdom inherited from past glorious generations. The Coba group is the starting point of an extensive network of sakbes, or stone roads, that extend to the 4 cardinal points and which communicated Coba internally as well as with other distant places. Five lakes surround the 70 square kilometers of this splendid Maya city. Between the years 800 and 1000 after Christ, long before its end, Coba controlled and influenced the commercial routes of the Caribbean coast and the center and north of the peninsula. In the next 5 centuries, Coba was forced to submit to other cities like Mayapan, Tulum, and Xel-Ha. The splendor had reached its end. As the Mayas wrote, every moon, every year, every wind goes by and then disappears. The life-giving blood also meets its final resting place. Altunja, located in Belize, near the coast of the Caribbean Sea, belongs to the early Classic period. Altunja. The site has not been totally explored. Kinich Ahau, the sun god, is represented everywhere. For more than 200 years, an intense architectural activity was developed here. For this reason, several periods of construction and decorative elements belonging to different stages have been discovered, especially within the larger buildings. Several discoveries seem to indicate that the inhabitants of Altunja were wealthy people. More than 300 jade objects were found in the tomb of the main building. Most of the foundations and temples had in the upper section spaces covered with the typical Maya corbel vault. The constructions have long corridors with several entries. Most of what we see in our times are elevations covered with weed that has continued to grow through many centuries, thus concealing the stone that previously sheltered an entire civilization. Kinich Ahau, the sun god, shines everywhere and instills life. An important site belonging to the late Classic period rises in the border between Guatemala and Belize. Xunantunich was a great political center in those days. and it is associated with the region of El Petén due to its proximity to it and based on the cultural elements found there. Several sculptures that narrate important events involving the ruling class have been found on this site. This monument is the biggest in the place, with a height of 40 meters. In this building, known by the name of the Castle, there are several masks with astronomic motifs modeled in stucco, representing, among others, the sun god, Venus, and the moon. The foundation of this magnificent structure is decorated by all this and more. Neither archaeologists nor historians know the original name of this site, known today as Cohum Lich, that was actually taken from the English name Cohum Ridge, which means a hill covered with cohum palm. The first structure that we find as we enter the site is the Acropolis, a structure with a rectangular foundation that faces the main plaza on the northern side. Like other Maya monuments, it is the result of several construction periods. The remains of rooms that must have been covered with the Maya corbel vault still rise on top of the foundation. Structure B2 was also built along several different stages, which is the reason for the asymmetry in the foundation and the staircase. It is interesting to note that the style of the building was common during the early classic period. Adult Mayas passionately played Poc-ta-Poc, the traditional ball game, utilizing hard rubber balls. Like every other great Maya city, Cohum Lich was provided with a court to play this ancient game. Many of the most important ceremonial constructions in Cohum Lich, as well as numerous dwelling compounds that have not yet been explored, are concentrated in a surface measuring 1,300 by 1,100 meters. Structure B3, also known as the Steps, takes its name from the monumental 100-meter-high staircase that rises in the front. A temple with two long, narrow chambers intercommunicated at 2 points is located in the upper section. The archaeological city is built upon a series of low limestone hills, 100 meters above sea level, limited by a wide swampy zone that extends to the south all the way to the Ondo River, which forms part of the border with Belize. In spite of the great archaeological richness that predominates here, there is little information about the site. The occupation period began in the early Classic period and extended until the end of the late Classic period. The Masks Pyramid is no doubt the most important building in Cohum Lich. Not only for its beauty and well-preserved condition, but also due to the information that it provides for the understanding of Maya culture. The structure has 5 step-like terraces with rounded corners and moldings that decorate them. Its builders took advantage of the topography of the place. The first steps that provide access to the upper section are carved from the rock itself, and from a certain height on, the actual construction starts. The 6 masks representing the sun god that flank the staircase are extraordinarily well preserved. because beauty remains, the polychrome that was painted on the masks by their creators, the eternal Mayas, can still be appreciated. Mayas, creators of all the gods and all the worlds, left messages that point out to us a dignified way of life. The Maya sea routes laid a network that, together with thousands of miles of wide roads, art and wisdom, now embrace humanity as a whole to provide it with the support and strength to continue with its permanent work, mankind itself.